Hello, good day to everyone. We, the first group, will discuss on the species interaction, population dynamics, and natural selection. To begin with, let us start with the opening prayer. For the Catholics, make the sign of the cross. As we gather here in the harbor for safety, we thank you for fellowship and family. We ask that you will strengthen us, restore us, and inspire us with your love. Lord, would you fill us with your peace, so that as we journey onwards, we would pour out your love and grace to others. We ask that our souls would catch the wind of your Spirit, so that we would take your promises to all the earth. Amen. So this is the guide and outline of what we will discuss in this chapter, and later on you will meet these beautiful and intelligent reporters. Species interactions can be classified based on their reciprocal effects. As the saying goes, no man is an island. Similarly, other species interact in many ways in order to acquire the basic needs and resources for growth, development, reproduction, and even survival. In this table, the plus sign means positive effect, minus sign means detrimental effect, and zero means no effect at all. In mutual interaction, neither of the two species affects the other. When both species benefits from each other, it is called mutualism. When one species benefits while the other one neither benefits nor harmed, it is termed as commensalism, like the bird with its nest on the tree. In competition, both species receive a detrimental effect. An example is two wild dogs known as does fighting over a carcass, which is a food resource, something both organisms need to survive. Now, when one species has this detrimental effect on the other population, but the affected species has no influence in return, it is termed as commensalism, like when taller trees shading the shorter plants. When one species gains while making the other species suffer or harmed, it is defined as predation, parasitism, and parasitoidism. In contrast with parasitism, in parasitoidism, the parasitoid's larvae kill their host to complete their life cycle. Like in this example, the wasp's larvae feeding on the caterpillar.
So in the previous section, we have discussed about the different species interactions. Now let's talk about how these different species interactions influence population dynamics. The different interactions have different effects, whether it be beneficial or detrimental on the individuals involved. Now these effects then influence the collective properties of birth and death at the population level. Now let's apply this on a specific species interactions so we can understand how it works. Let's take predation as an example. There are two effects, the negative and the positive. First, let's look into the negative effect, which is on the prey population. Predators function as agents of mortality by capturing and killing individual prey. So if there is an increase in the number of predators, there is also an increase in the number of prey killed because more predators will then be searching or looking for food resources. This then leads to an increase in the death rate of the prey population, consequently declining or decreasing the growth rate of the prey population. As the population of predator increases, there is a subsequent decline in the population of prey as a direct result of the prey's increased rate of mortality. Now let's use this similar approach to evaluate the positive effect of predation, which is on the predator's population side. The prey provides basic food resources to the predator and directly influences its ability to survive and reproduce. So if there is an increase in the availability of prey, there will also be an increase in the predator consumption because there will be more food to consume or to eat. Assuming that the reproductive fitness of a predator is directly related to its consumption of prey, an increase in the predator consumption will then increase the birth rate of the predator population. The result is a direct link between the availability of prey or the size of the prey population and the growth rate of the predator population. We can actually estimate the population growth using the logistic model of population growth as discussed in chapter 11. But there are things to consider. When individuals of two different species share a common limiting resource that defines the carrying capacity for each population, there is potential for competition between the individuals of the two species, and this is what we call the interspecific competition. Thus, the population density of both species must be considered when evaluating the role of density-dependent regulation on each population. Aside from considering the interspecific competition, we also have to factor in the conversion factor, because no matter how closely related the species are between the two populations, they are unlikely to be identical in their use of resources. So, it is necessary to define a conversion factor that can equate individuals of species 2 to that of species 1 as related to their consumption of the shared limited resource. The result would be from this simple logistic model for population growth to a more specific formula for species 1 and for species 2.
Species interactions can function as agent of natural selection. So, interaction between species will not influence individuals within the populations equally because first, interaction between species involves a diverse array of physiological processes and behavioral activities that are influenced by phenotypic characteristics, such as physiological, morphological, and behavioral characteristics of individual. And second, these phenotypic characteristics vary among individuals within the populations. So therefore, the variation among individuals within the population will result in differences in the nature and degree of interactions that occur. So for example, the seed-eating birds that eat the same plant species. Individuals of plant species produce varieties of seeds, such as small and large seeds, and this characteristic is heritable. So seed size is very important to birds because the larger the seed, the thicker the coat, and the harder for the bird to crush the seed with its bill. If the seed is not broken, then the seed passes through the digestive system, undigested, and provides no food for the bird. So as a result, the bird selects smaller seeds to eat since the coat is easier to break. In this graph, you will see the original distribution of seed sizes, the purple one, and the original distribution of bill sizes of birds. And in this slide, in this green graph, you will see that the birds prefer eating small seeds because, as stated lately, it is easier to eat since the coat is easier to break. And this would result in having a distribution of more larger seeds than smaller seeds as shown in this graph here at the right. Meaning, mas daghan ang larger seeds kay ang manggagmay man ang ginakaon sa mga birds. So this situation would affect the birds' population. If the birds with smaller bill are unable to crack larger seeds, then these individuals will decrease probability of survival and reproduction, whereas those who have larger bill will increase. As shown here in the graph on the right, you will really see the difference now if you would compare these two graphs here. With this situation, the result is a shift in the distribution of phenotypes and associated gene frequencies within the bird population towards the larger bill. This example is an example of coevolution, which is the process in which two species undergo reciprocal evolutionary change through natural selection. The previous example is an example of coevolution, which is an adaptation to the physical environment. Another example of coevolution is the relationship between flowering plants and their pollinators. This is example of coevolution that deals with adaptation in response to the interactions with other species. So as you can see in this illustration, when bee comes in contact with flower, the pollen is deposited to the bee's body, which is then transferred to another flower as the bee travels from flower to flower. So how are the pollinators attracted to the flowers? Pollinators are attracted with the flower's beautiful color or scent, but the most common reason is that because they are attracted to the nectars, which is a sugar-rich liquid produced by plants. The purpose of nectars is to attract pollinators. It is produced in the gland called nectaries, which is often located at the floral tube of the plant. This example is an excellent example of magnification of reciprocal evolutionary responses, coevolution resulting from mutually beneficial interaction. A more specific example is the hummingbirds. Its long bills are adapted to the extraction of nectars, and they use this bill to extract nectars from long tubular flowers, as you can see here in the photo. So let us assume that these species of birds only prefer obtaining nectars from long tubular flowers because it provides more nectars. This would result in more hummingbirds visiting the larger flowers because it produces more nectars. However, the larger the floral tube makes it more difficult for the birds to gain access to the nectars, especially those who have shorter bills, since sizes also in the hummingbirds, their bills also varies. With this, the relative fitness of longer-billed individual will increase at the expense of those who have short-billed individuals, and longer-billed individuals' fitness and its offspring will increase as well as the long tubular flowers. Genetic changes are occurring in each population are reinforced and magnified by mutually beneficial interaction between two species. One consequence of this coevolutionary process is specialization, wherein changes and phenotypic characteristics of species involve function to limit the ability of the species carry out the same of similar interactions with other species. From the last example, the increase in bill size in hummingbird population will function to limit its ability to restrict its feeding subset on large flowers with long floral tubes. This can be obligate because both species will result in being adapted on each other for survival and reproduction. Unlike being dependent on each other, there are also those who compete for food resources. For example, the seed-eating birds again. Imagine if these two species of seed-eating birds live in the same place, and both species vary in body and bill size. As you can see in this graph, this orange graph is for a species that has small body and bill size, and this green graph is for the birds who have large body and bill size. Those who have smaller bills will of course eat small seeds, and those who have large bills will eat large seeds. But they still overlap in the proportions of different seed sizes they select for their diet, as you can see here in the graph below. Competition among individuals of those two species for intermediate seed size results in an increase in the relative fitness of smaller individuals in the population of the smaller species and larger individuals of the larger species. And the end result of a natural selection is the divergence in the average bill size for the two population. As you can see in the graph here below, nag-adjust silang dalawa. This divergence in the average bill size of the two bird population functions to reduce the potential for competition by shifting the range of seed sizes used by the two species.
The nature of species interactions can vary across geographic landscape. Did you know species with wide geographic distributions generally encounter a broader range of physical environment conditions than species whose distribution is more restricted? With this, it can limit or spread the gene flow of a species. Two great examples are warbling vireo or virogilvos and cerulean warbler or Dendroica cerula. As what you can see in the picture, both are bird species, but the difference between them is their nature of interactions. Because virogilvos roams from coast to coast around USA, while Dendroica cerula is just restricted to a small portion of United States only. We must take note that the difference in the types of species interactions by different local populations can lead to genetic differentiation and evolution of local types. Another excellent example to know is the study of the resistance of neurotoxin tetrodotoxin or TTX by Edmond Brody from Utah State University. Newts contain TTX in their skins, which is fatal to other predators, but garter snakes have TTX resistant phenotype. So according to the studies, it is on their genes from parent to offspring. However, the researchers found out after collecting species from 40 local populations that the level of TTX resistant varies from the presence of toxic newts in local population. The geographic location of the species impacts a lot. We all know that Antarctica is limited due to its geographic location.
So polar bears' gene flow are restricted also, especially the nature of their habitat is rare. So together, let's say, preserve polar bears. The entirety of this presentation tackles about the variation of physical conditions lead to variation in phenotypic characteristics. Species with wide geographic distributions encounter broader range of biotic interaction. I hope you learned something from this topic. Our next topic will be about species interactions can be diffuse. According to Merriam-Webster Dictionary, diffuse means to cause to spread freely, scatter, or extend. Predator to prey, competitors, and mutually beneficial are only few of the species interactions. However, they are not exclusive or involve only between two species, but more than two. As what you can see in the slide, it is the pollination network. So most plants are pollinated by multiple animal species like butterflies, and each animal species pollinates multiple plant species as well. Two great examples are honeybees and white mangrove. So honeybees visit multiple flowers, while white mangrove is visited by different insect species. So it forms diffuse association. So to know more about diffuse coevolution, it is a process in which a network of species undergoes reciprocal evolutionary change through natural selection. So the group interact with other groups of species that will lead to natural selection. On the other hand, pairwise coevolution is between two species only. There is more to explore about the examples of coevolution in this chapter. I hope you learned something from my presentation. Thank you.
Interactions between organisms are so common to be observed around us. This could be between two animals, two human beings, or animals to human beings, animals in the same species, or animals that are not the same at all. In this section, I will talk about how species interaction influence the species niche. Species niche under the context of ecological niche. So, what is ecological niche? Ecological niche, by definition, is the range of physical and chemical conditions under which a species can persist, and the area of essential resources that it uses. The niche comprises the organism's habitat, activity pattern, and the resources it could obtain from where it lives. The concept of ecological niche was first developed independently by Joseph Grenell and Charles Elton. They are both ecologies. For Grenell's definition, he focuses more to the habitat and the limitation imposed by the physical environment. For Elton, on the other hand, he emphasizes the role of species in the context of community or species interaction, which I mentioned earlier. Later on, the niche concept has been expanded by Evelyn Hutchinson with her proposal of hypervolume that resulted to two different positions in the niche. The first one is the fundamental niche, followed by the realized niche. The fundamental niche is the entire set of conditions under which an organism can survive and reproduce. For realized niche, it is the set of conditions used by an organism after including interaction with other species. As you can see inside the yellow bubbles, there are questions you could use as a reference in order to identify the two niches. The first bubble for fundamental niche is where it could live, and the second bubble contains where it does live for realized niche. You could also remember and always notify that fundamental niche does not involve interaction, so it does not have competition. For realized niche, it involves interaction with other species, so it means the competition is available. This section will talk about how species interactions can also drive adaptive radiation. As an organism ourselves, we know how vital it is for reproduction in our lives.
in order for us to multiply and for the species to continue to exist for generations. Adaptive radiation is a process by which one species gives rise to multiple species that exploits the different features of environment, such as habitat and food resources. This shows how dependable the organisms are to the environment. Since resources for environment is limited, competitive interaction between species arises. Resource competition is often inferred as a primary factor for phenotypic divergence. Phenotypic divergence is a result of variations among local populations in biotic interactions, which could also lead for phenotypic divergence to function as mechanisms of adaptive radiation, if it would lead or would result to reproductive isolation that is necessary for speciation. Reproductive isolation is a byproduct of changes in morphology, behavior, habitat preferences that are the actual objectives of selection.
The last part of this chapter is the ecological issues and application. Urbanization has negatively impacted most species while favoring a few. Urban ecology is the study of the ecology of organisms in the context of the urban environment. The dominion of humans in recent years and the development of urban areas has negatively impacted most species and only benefited a few. The habitat loss is the main cause of population declines and is the result for expanding agriculture and urbanization in order to meet the needs of growing human population. This has led to the extinction of local species and often eliminates native species. Larger species that are moving into the suburban landscape and increases in number might negatively impact us, humans. White-tailed deer, carrier of Lyme disease, and Canada geese, attracted to large open areas of grasses, create health problems. Urban exploiters can tolerate high levels of disturbance, like weeds that can grow in pavement, birds that are nesting in urban areas like pigeons, peregrine falcon, and house sparrows, and even the rats and mice dwelling in our houses. These organisms thrive in urban environments due to a reduction of predator populations, safer and less risky for some species than in rural habitats. Humans also plays a role in dispersing these species from city to city through intentional or unintentional assistance, which has led to the increase of non-native species as you move from rural habitats towards urban centers. So that's all for today, and for questions and clarifications, comment below. Let's end with a closing prayer. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen.